Welcome to Inspirational Leadership. I'm your host, Kristen Harcourt, and I am excited for another fantastic guest. Today, I'm going to be having a conversation with Ashley Sardjoe. Ashley is a global people and organization leader with a passion for driving transformative change that enhances organizational performance and drives sustainable business growth. With over 15 years of experience in the field of HR, Ashley is renowned for his ability to develop and execute human capital strategies that enable organizations to achieve their strategic objectives. He is currently the VP Country People and Organization Head for Novartis in Canada. As a natural change agent, Ashley thrives on leading organizations through periods of growth and transformation, working collaboratively with stakeholders to craft compelling visions for the future and delivering bold and innovative strategies to achieve their goals. He is a passionate advocate for diversity and inclusion and is committed to creating work environments that foster innovation, accountability, and engagement. Welcome to the show, Ashley.
Thank you very much for having me, Kirsten.
I think anyone who heard that bio is probably, their ears are perking up and are getting very excited to be able to hear this conversation and learn more from you. As a starting point, Ashley, and you get to start wherever you'd like, I would love the audience to get to know a little bit more about you and your story and how you got to where you are now and the work that you're doing in the world.
That's interesting because I'm asking myself that question often. So let me take you back. Born and raised in the Netherlands. My parents come from a beautiful country in South America, which is called Suriname. It's a country north of Brazil, which is a former Dutch colony. But if you go further back, my ancestors actually came from the northern part of India at the end of the 19th century. And as I said, my parents came early 70s to the Netherlands, met in the Netherlands, and that's where I was born and raised. And selfishly, I'm taking those elements of those different cultural backgrounds with me. I'm using them very opportunistic. I really try to take the best out of all these cultures together and use that in my life. So from a spiritual part, definitely goes back to India, from a enjoying life and not taking life too serious. That definitely comes from the Caribbean and my love for, having family and friends over and cooking for them and just having a good time. And then I think a healthy level of directness is definitely something I've been taking from growing up in the Netherlands. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I love that combination. And tell me from a career perspective. So I know you've been with Novartis for a while, but you started in more management consulting. So what got you into the HR role, made you shift? Because it can be different when you're doing the consulting as opposed to being within the organization and being a practitioner. Tell me more about that piece.
Yeah, no, for sure. I definitely have a atypical HR career, right? So as you said, I have a background in organizational development and organizational change. And I actually started my career with some of the big four in management consultancy, and was mainly working on transformational project, always with an HR component, sometimes also on the crossroad between HR and IT, but, projects that were really, were there to really help the performance of the organization. So I'll be honest, if at the time you would have asked me, would I ever, move to the real HR side of things, I probably would have said no,
Mhm.
because I was just enjoying, I guess, the steep learning curve
Mm.
that a time in management consulting brings. And just the fact that, I was being exposed to different companies all across the globe, was just very interesting. I think it all changed when I had the opportunity to become the strategic assistant to one of the global HR heads at Novartis. And that really allowed me to see the function as a whole, allowed me to build very strong relationship with some of the top executives. And I think most of all, I think there I really saw the impact that HR could have at scale, in an organization. And I think that changed my mind a little bit. And I've been very fortunate to work for amazing leaders that have also given me the opportunity to take on like an HR country head role without having a typical HR experience. And since then, I'm truly enjoying my time in HR, and I think there's what better time to be in HR than today. I mean, I think most of the strategic challenges that our business leaders are struggling with, uh, there is a significant HR component to all of those. So yeah, that's a little bit about my story and how I landed in the world of HR, Kristen.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I think you're so right. I think there is such an opportunity for HR to be that strategic thought partner to help the organization really understand what this looks like, because doesn't matter what the strategy is, it's always going to require humans and making sure the humans are supported through that strategy. And I think you've done some really incredible work when it comes to change management, when it comes to transformation. I think it's also great that you get to be able to have that cross section through working with lots of different organizations and bringing all of that into the work that you're doing at Novartis. And I think when it comes to change management strategies, there's I think different perspectives and different ways that it gets approached. And I really, really like your approach, which is it starts with the individual first, and then we start to talk about. So talk to me a little bit more with when we start to think about, you can tell me, what you've been working on at Novartis or just in general in terms of when you're going to be doing this kind of transformation. How do you get both the individuals on board, the organization on board in order to be able to do this as effectively as possible?
Yeah, I love it, and I think I really like what you said. Is that even from an academic perspective, I have a background in organizational change. But if there's one thing, Kristen, throughout my career, I've learned is that there's no such thing as organizational change, right? I believe organizational change is ultimately comprised of individual change. It is really essential to recognize that organizational change involves multiple individuals basically coming together to collectively adapt and transform an entire system. And I think that is always the focus that I'm having when I'm challenge actually the organization to change, right? I think um, I really believe if any individual will see change as an opportunity, versus a threat to grow and to continuously, adapt to a world that is ever evolving. I think when you create that mindset in an organization, the willingness to change is, oh wow, significantly increased. Give me 1 second. The light just went off.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So that is a little bit my starting point. And let's face it, Kristen, not everybody likes change, right? I think that is just a cruel reality, because often change means letting things go. um,
Mhm.
and I always think about change in two separate buckets. There's change that you drive yourself, and then you're committed to it because you as an individual, you want to grow, you want to evolve. And then there is change which is happening to you, because of external factors, because of things that are happening in your organization or in your personal life. And that means that you are not in control. And I guess that lack of control always, which is hard for people, right? So I try to be very aware of the different kind of change. And I think we also have to accept the fact that even for those people to whom change is happening, there's people that are more comfortable dealing with change
Yeah.
than others. And
Yeah.
having lived in a few countries in the world, I see some similarities, for example, between
Mhm.
the Netherlands, Switzerland,
Mhm.
and Canada. That
Yeah.
I think the similarities are that these are countries that they're very comfortable countries, which makes it extremely pleasant to live in. They're safe, they're economically stable. I think people don't always have learned how to suffer a little bit, right? So when something happens to them, it
Mhm.
throws them off, right? And if I
Mhm.
compare that to some of my colleagues that live in other parts of the world, in Latin America or in Asia,
Yeah.
you see that it's in their DNA. It's like true life. They have learned how to suffer more, so their ability to cope with a changing environment and their ability to put things in perspective um, is, yeah, it's I find it very fascinating to see that different.
I think that's such a good point in terms of those cultural differences. That makes so much sense. And then, so if some people are listening who are more in North America or Europe, and so they do have some of those struggles in that the resilience or the growth mindset or being able to shift that perspective or see things from a different lens, what would you say are some kind of some steps they could take to start to build that muscle and get more comfortable with change? Because I think absolutely there's a spectrum, and there's going to be some people, and I know they're not listening to this podcast because the people listening to the podcast are about wanting to learn and grow, but there's some people who are just going to say, I don't want to change, I'm not going to get on board, I don't care, I don't want to learn. But that's not our people here. So our audience, they're going to realize, yeah, I do notice sometimes, I'm on the spectrum, I'm kind of in the middle. And sometimes either myself, I notice that I might struggle with the change, or some of the leaders might be noticing I don't struggle as much, but I struggle with being able to support others who are struggling, right? So some of those leaders might be saying, what's the big deal? I mean, it happens all the time. And so for them, and I think this is such a part that's an interesting part of empathy when it comes to emotional intelligence, is learning that while something might feel very easy for you, somebody else could be having a very different experience. So I guess two pronged. Number one, for those people who are struggling, what are some suggestions you have to start to work through those struggles? And then if they are not struggling, but they're supporting a team that's struggling, what are some of your thoughts there?
Yeah, let me start by a beautiful quote that when I heard it from the first time, for the first time, it really hit home. It's a quote of Viktor Frankl, and it says that between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response.
Yeah.
In our response lies growth and our freedom. And I had to read it once, I had to read it twice, and I don't know, I got almost like a shivering sensation the first time I read it, right? Because to your point, let's think about when change is happening to you. The beauty about life is that you have the power to choose how you are going to respond to that change. That sounds great. I mean, that is maybe the theory. Making the right choice is not always easy, right, Kristen? Because often the right thing to do is also the difficult thing to do.
Right.
What I realized, and that has been my own personal journey, is that I think you can prepare yourself physically, mentally, and intellectually to help yourself on using actually that space that is given, right? And one of the things that I did myself is, unfortunately, life is, there will be some chosen suffering that will come to you. I mean, you will lose your job maybe one day. You might end up in your partner leaving you, or your body will start to decline. Unfortunately, these things happen. What I believe is that if you choose yourself and expose yourself a little bit to suffering yourself, I really believe you can prepare yourself for change that might come to you one day, right? So may it be in a physical challenge, like exposing yourself, training for a physical challenge. I did it last year
Yeah.
by running a marathon,
Mm-hmm.
and people think I did that for the physical part.
Mm-hmm.
No, I was purely doing it because I wanted to experience my body completely shutting down, and I wanted just to toughen myself a little bit, right? Even in my day-to-day job, I'm a bit of a pleaser, Kristen. I like to keep people around myself happy,
Yeah.
around my happy. So that means that sometimes I used to shy away from having the tough conversations, and I
Mm-hmm.
really kind of increase the account, my own account, holding myself accountable on saying
Mm-hmm.
no, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
not going to help you, it's not going to help the person, but really exposing yourself to that level of discomfort. And I believe if we continuously do that in a very disciplined manner, that it will ultimately impact the way an individual is capable of dealing with change. So if there's one thing I can give to our listeners is, you can, through discipline to commitment, you can prepare yourself in a way that you can actually use that beautiful power to make the right choice on how to cope with change.
Yeah, I think that's so great. And I know you and I are both fans of Susan David, and she
Oh,
talks a
yes.
lot about um, what it looks like. So there's this thing where she talks about in her TED talk that people have this wish around not having to have feelings or have suffering. And then she says, you have dead people's wishes because if you are alive, there is going to be suffering, but it's not labeling it as it's a bad thing, that to be human is to experience the ebbs and flows. And I really love what you're suggesting there, is that what can you do in a way that you're actually inviting in that opportunity to hit your edges, to be able to practice that. And for some it might not be a marathon, but for some listening it might be, what's something that feels a little uncomfortable for you that you've always wanted to try, but it feels it's a little bit hitting your edges, right? I'm going to give
Exactly.
myself some examples too for people listening. So I remember back in the day, I enjoyed singing. So if I were to go take singing lessons, or I did some hip hop classes, or I tried a new art or something like that, and those might not even feel as challenging mentally, but for some people it is, because even being somewhere where some of the things might show up, your people pleasing, for me, it might be some perfectionism that shows up. And then the piece that I think sometimes gets left out is, what does it look like when those feelings do come up? Because they will. I know for sure, Ashley, there were times when you were training for that marathon or doing that marathon where feelings came up. But the goal here is not to repress or suppress and not have those feelings. It's actually to give space for those feelings and to be felt, and then to get to the other side. And then when you release those feelings and allow them to be experienced, you get to the other side where you are building that mental strength. My experience is so many people, where these opportunities that show up, they don't allow themselves to be with it. And then that's where we start to have some of the numbing, right? So, oh, we're going through this change management strategy. It feels very stressful.
Yeah.
Instead of creating space to feel the feelings, which everyone naturally has, we start to get into this scrolling on social media, having wine, shopping therapy, overworking, whatever it is. And so I think it's so important what you shared. And I wanted to just piggyback on that, is that we want to welcome in the discomfort that can come with that suffering, because that's how you get to the other side, and that's how you build the muscle.
I love it. No, and I think we had the pleasure at Novartis. We invest a lot in our people leaders, and we brought all our people leaders together a few weeks ago in Quebec City, and we had actually Susan David on stage
Oh, good.
speaking about emotional agility, and she left such a mark. I mean, the number of managers that came up to me and really thanked me for bringing her, to this meeting, and for the inspiration that she brought. And like you said, some of the quotes that also even stuck with me is like, about that discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life,
Yeah.
right? If you're really serious about change, just know that you will go through to some uncomfortable situation, right? Stop trying to dodge that process. Stop looking for instant gratification. Just enjoy that even those uncomfortable feelings that you're going through as a person, like, enjoy that growth process, right? I mean, it's in those during those times that you're actually growing as an individual. May it be in your personal life or in your professional life. And what I love what you said, Kristen, around, if you can build those standards in your life,
Yeah.
that unnegotiable standards in your life, it will prevent you to fall back on the things that we did in the past, like you said, either zooming out or just binge watching or whatever, eating or whatever. It's just, if you can build those standards in your life, I think it will really prepare you to take on any change that might come your way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And I also want to say, I mean, for people listening too, like, how awesome is that Novartis is doing something to help set their leaders up for success by being able to learn those skills? Because I think a lot of these skills, you don't know what you don't know, right? And what does it look like to help support people in being able to build these muscles, build these skills? So speaking to the people manager piece, which was the part two, so if we've got some people managers that are noticing, they're going through the change management strategy strategy. And we've got the people in different stages. We've got those early adopters who are jumping right on board. Then we've got those kind of in the middle. I don't know, I feel maybe. And then we might have some people over on this end that are really struggling with it. Um, how would you recommend a leader could best show up? Because I know you've talked a lot about courageous leadership as well. For you, what does it look like to be a courageous leader in those moments?
Yeah. I mean, what you just described, I think that is the challenge of every transformation, right? Is that if you think about a transformation, it's a collection of individuals that are undergoing a change. And like you said, unfortunately, all of them are on their own journey, right? Like you said, somebody are ready to roll. They see the case for change. They can't wait to kind of start moving. Others are like, let's see, what does it mean for me, right? And then I think the others are completely stuck. When I speak about courageous leadership, I think you need to be very honest about those that are completely stuck. And even after trying for multiple times to bring them along the journey,
Yeah.
is just to have a very honest conversation to say, like it or not, but this organization is moving, and we would love for you to join us on this journey. But this is what we're going to need from you in terms of an openness and a willingness to change as well. And if you are, then we will help you on that journey. If not, then let's also have an honest conversation because, Kristen, any transformation is difficult. Even if you have all the people on board, it
Yeah.
is tough, right? Because it's
Yeah.
operating model changes, it's new processes, it
Yes.
is tough. And the chances of failing, even with the people on board, is
Mm-hmm.
significant. Now,
Mm-hmm.
try that with people that are actually not on board.
Mm-hmm.
It will mean it's close to impossible. So
Mm-hmm.
that is where I really try to encourage my direct peers to say, be honest to yourself, have those honest conversation. It
Yes.
doesn't mean, Kristen, that when somebody doesn't get it, you're like, okay, he or she doesn't get it, let's get rid of it. No,
Yeah.
but if you systematically see that the person is not only not willing to change, but is also trying to hold others back, then
Yes.
I think as a leader, you need to have you need to have courage to make the tough calls because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
those individuals are the long tenured
Mm-hmm.
high performers of the past.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very unfortunate, but yeah, these things happen in an organization.
Ashley, I think it's really, really important what you talked about there when it comes to courageous leadership, because I think being direct and being able to have really name what's happening, because sometimes that person might realize, you know what, I think this isn't where I want to be. Like, as the organization is evolving, I'm now realizing that on the individual level that this might not be something that's going to be right for me anymore because the culture can shift and how the organization is running and all of that kind of stuff. So I think part of what you're saying there is important because sometimes people start to realize, oh, this might not be the right place for the next part of my journey, and that's okay. I think the other thing that's really important with what you said there is transparency and having direct conversations. You just never know where those may go. And that could be a moment where that person, shares something that's going on with them and why they're having such a struggle. And then it actually ends up creating much stronger connection between that leader and that individual. And I think, we have these organizations where we spend so much of our time. And I think the more we can create these environments that are really based on vulnerability and authenticity and the humanity of who we are, and both can be true, like that's all happening, and there's still somewhere we have to go and results that need to happen, and but both are true, and one is not more important than the other. But I think the more that you create this environment that encourages those kind of conversations, because you're right, because what can sometimes happen is there's some destructive behavior that happens, and I think we've all been in organizations where we've seen some of that destructive behavior that's been allowed to take place for too long, and that really has such an impact on everybody around those individuals.
And you don't always see it, right?
Yeah.
You especially let's acknowledge, particularly in a post-COVID world where
Yeah.
people are operating in a hybrid world where often working from home, it's not always visible the dynamics that are ongoing. And I think here you just need to keep your finger on the pulse, stay connected to the people. And when you sense that, this is going on, I think you need to take action, because you are holding the rest of the organization back as well.
Yeah, exactly. From your perspective, both at Novartis and then seeing this at other organizations, what do you see in terms of some perhaps common themes where the change management strategy, some barriers with it not going as well because of how it was executed on in terms of perhaps communication? I'm not even going to name it. I'd love to hear from you. Like, what do you notice when an organization gets it really well, and where do you notice where some of those themes, where some of the things that you notice in terms of patterns when they're not getting it as well?
Yeah. What I believe is that the preparation really, really matters, right? Having a very clear narrative, having a very clear case for change, not only in your communication department, but really a consistent narrative that all of your leadership rallies behind, and then even finding ways to kind of have that cascaded down to maybe your extended leadership team, so that everybody understands the case for change.
Yeah.
But then I think when I talk about the preparation, is that how do you really create a clear plan on how we are going to execute this transformation? And
Yeah.
it sounds so basic, but often I see organizations that they have a very clear plan on what they want to. They know they have the end goal in
Yeah.
mind. They know how it will look like.
Yeah.
They completely underestimate those fundamentals from a simple project management perspective, from a communication perspective, to kind of go about it. And it's a lot of discipline that you just have to go through. And the other thing is that although it is a very project plan based exercise, it involves people, right? And I think,
Mhm.
as I said before, it's like you might think, okay, it's ready to go for our next milestone,
Yeah.
but then you just realize that some of the people are just not there yet.
Yeah.
So what I learned, and I learned it the hard way, I'm not gonna lie, Kristen, is that
Yeah.
instead of you expecting them to speed up and say, hey, guys, come on, we're changing. You just, no. I mean, that is not fair for your people to expect. So, as a leadership team, you need to be willing to slow down. You need to be having the courage to say, okay, we thought that we would have been here change wise. We are not.
Yes.
All right, guys. So let's go back. Let's go back to them. Let's see what's going on, and let's try to bring them along. I'm using the analogy here, as I'm a runner, is you if running faster than you, it's not fair that I say, Kristen, come on, pick it up.
Yeah.
What I can do is that, no, I can slow down
Yeah.
and say, hey, let's pick it up together, or let's not pick it up at all, but let's just let me come and run with you, and we will make it to the end goal. And this requires that, although it is a you do a very clear preparation and you have a very clear plan, you need to have that flexibility and the agility, for the simple fact because it involves people, and not everybody is in the same part of this infamous change journey.
I think that's so important in terms of the pace. And it feels like it's also giving, whoever's trying to execute on this change strategy a bit of a permission slip as well, that you could have very ambitious goals. And sometimes some people will not have reached that yet. And it could be really, really good information that you get when you start to talk and just say, help me understand what's going on. Maybe there's something that they hadn't anticipated, because we all know we can have the best laid plans, and then all of a sudden some barriers, some things that hadn't been anticipated show up. Having those conversations, as opposed to like, let's keep on pushing through, and taking a step back and saying, okay, what's going on here? Like, maybe there's might not even just be around the change management, them not being on board. It might be some new factors that have come to light. I can think of some times where I've been doing engagement work with some organizations where they do their engagement surveys, and sometimes they get some of the results and they want to get underneath, what are some of these results really
Yeah.
saying? And I'll do some listening sessions. And I can't tell you how many times there's great, 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 great ideas and things at the top. But then when you talk to some people at some layers down, there's a whole bunch of stuff that actually happens in their day to day that up at the top they're not aware of. And that's going to happen. You can't anticipate all of those things. But I think if there's an appetite to be able to ask questions, to show up from a place of curiosity, what's this here to teach us? And then you might get at the roots, and by getting underneath what's happening there and making changes there in the whole grandest scheme of things, it actually ends up being more effective.
I love that. And to your point, right, of having a sense on what's going on in the organization,
Right.
again, particularly in a post-COVID hybrid world, is so important, right? And in my role, and this is also what I expect from my team and even from my peers, is you have to get a sense of what's going on in the organization. And I mean, being present helps, right? Not only in your team, in your little bubble, no, especially as a leader. And we are very, very big on what we call enterprise leadership. It's not only about running your shop and maximizing your shop. No, it's how do you contribute to the overall performance of this organization. It means that you need to show up as a leader for all of our associates, right? So going
Yes.
out, just having a, to your point, Chris, a very sincere curiosity of what's going on in your work world, and what is it that we as an organization can do to do better. I can tell you, having those conversations will give you 10 times more the insights than you will get from any engagement survey. And we do these engagement surveys 4 times per year. So yes, it's a great pulse survey, but that's not my main source of where I need to focus on as a leader or as an organization. That comes from the conversations I have with associates across all levels.
Exactly, exactly. And you've brought me to a great place that I was going to ask you a question around. So the show is called Inspirational Leadership.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious from your perspective, when you think about inspirational leaders, which we're talking about leaders that are being great leaders and some of those behaviors they bring to leadership, what would you say that would look like?
Authenticity is definitely the one that for me I think is lonely at the top. I think what I value in the leaders I worked with is that they brought their own selves. They were real. They were very vulnerable about their journey. They brought me into that journey to say, look, this is how I was when I was younger. This is how I developed myself. These and by the way, these are the things I'm currently working on to become the best version of myself.
Yeah.
I love leaders, and maybe because that's how I see myself. Is I love leaders, Kristen, that don't do not take themselves
Mm,
very serious, that take their job extremely serious,
yes.
but that don't take themselves very serious. And I think that links to humor. I
Mm,
really believe that humor is one of the most undervalued leadership traits or concepts in general, right? Because
yeah.
it's so disarming. It's such an amazing tool to let people in, and to be vulnerable. And it has at least helped me throughout my career to build deep relationship with people. And when I think about the leaders that I admire
Mm,
and that I would love to work for, I think
mm,
they all have this. I think just having a good laugh about even the most serious topics in life really helps. And that is what inspires me, because I think it's a confirmation that this is a real person. Like, this person,
yes.
it's not a facade, it's not a
Yeah.
an act that we're seeing. So yeah, I think that for me is, when I think about inspirational leadership, is what I value, uh, and also what I try to live by myself.
Mm. People will hear me talk a lot on the show about the importance of laughter and play and fun, because I think that people get into, I am in the workplace and I'm adulting and there's no time for fun or play. And it doesn't, again, going back to the dichotomy and the dualities, it's not an either or. You can still be working towards very, very important business outcomes and be able to have fun and laugh while you're doing it. I think it's essential. So
I love
I'm
that.
so glad you shared that. And I think that authenticity and vulnerability and humility, right? To also, as a leader, to share that you don't have it all figured out, that you're valuable like everybody else. Even through at the beginning of the show, when you shared yeah, I have a propensity to be a bit of a people pleaser. I think sharing that, and if all leaders can share some of those things, yeah, here are some of the things that I know that can be some of my defaults. It then gives other people permission to share those things about themselves and be able to accept all parts of themselves. And that's how I think we connect more human to human.
Yeah, and I encourage all of the leaders and to be vulnerable, right? And
Mm,
being an HR leader, having had the pleasure to work with many leadership teams, one of those exercises that you do to connect is to show a little bit or to share a little bit about your history, your journey. And what I sometimes also see is that it almost becomes a competition, like, oh,
right.
how bad was
Yeah.
my life? And I was like, it's
Yeah.
not about that. It's
Yeah.
just about, even if it's just about the exercise itself, it's about letting people in,
Mm,
right? Opening up your doors to let people know this
mm,
has been my journey. And let's face it, some people's journey is more sad or more inspiring or has been a tougher journey, but it's okay. And yet it's your journey. It's not about how tough it was. It's about trusting the people around you that you're gonna, who are you working with every day, and
yeah.
hopefully towards an amazing goal that's going to elevate the performance of the organization, is to allowing those people in and to see something about your journey, and also creating the understanding is how can they help you on that journey to become the best version of yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's so important. I remember as when I first became a professional speaker many years ago, that would be like, oh, I didn't have this awful thing that happened. How can I be an inspiring speaker? And I learned very quickly that's not what it's actually about.
No.
But I think the vulnerability can get that too, right? Because vulnerability is around people also just getting to know, like, it's so interesting when you hear, oh my gosh, like back in the day you were a tennis player, or back in the day you did this thing, which is again getting you to know, giving you an opportunity to learn more about this person and who they are and what makes them unique. To
Yeah.
me, that's the most important part, not necessarily these, awful. I think we've all had little t or big T traumas in some way along our
Yeah.
journey, but it's that I think sometimes that gets interpreted as what vulnerability needs to be. But vulnerability is just even sharing a part of yourself that could be something unique or something that you might think is weird that people don't know about yourself, that now all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, I love that. You
I
collect
know.
stamps or whatever the thing is, that all of a
Yes.
sudden there's a connection there.
No, I fully agree. And even the most mundane things about yourself
Yeah.
is a way to be vulnerable, right? And as long as people feel it's real because you're letting them in, and it's
Yeah.
not because you want to create, you want them to feel sad about you. No, that's it's not about that. So I love that.
Exactly. Exactly. Very genuine.
Yeah.
I feel like we could talk for hours, but as we start to wrap up today's episode, I always like to give my guests an opportunity to leave a final thought, whatever is most top of mind for you in this moment.
And we spoke about Susan David, and I'm gonna steal with pride one of the nuggets that she left, not only with me but with the people manager. We spoke a lot about change. One of the other things that really stuck with me, Kristen, is as you are undergoing change, and then particularly if you are not the driver, but you feel that change is happening to you,
Mm-hmm.
what you will do is you will start to create a lot of stories, right? Oh, why is this happening only to me? And this is not fair. And there's plenty of things. What she said, and it was so profound. She's like, even if all those things, all those stories that you are sharing, even if all those stories are true, how are you going to show up? Again, going back to that choice. Like, even if all those stories are true, you still have a choice to show up in the way you want to show up. So be intentional about it and show up. Like, have the discipline and hold yourself accountable while going through that change to show up the way you want to show up.
Yeah.
And honestly, it sounds like such a simple thing, Kristen, but if we can all do that while being exposed to change, I honestly believe we can turn the fact that people look at change as a threat
Yeah.
to looking at change as an opportunity for personal growth. So I
I
think that's
love
what I want
that.
to leave. I would love the listeners with that.
Yes, I think that's so good. And what an empowered place to remind everyone that we're always at choice, even though it can be difficult. You still get to choose how you show up and have so much power in that. Thank you so much for being here today, Ashley. Where can people learn more about you and Novartis and connect with you?
Yes. So if they want to learn more about Novartis, I encourage all of our listeners to have a look at our website, www.novartis.com. And if they want to learn more about myself or about my journey, or just have a conversation around change, they can reach me at my LinkedIn page at Ashley Sardjoe. I'm sure that through this wonderful podcast, they can find me there.
Mm, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I did as well. And so, for everybody, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to share with others. Thanks for your reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you would like to develop more confident and emotionally intelligent leaders in your organization, let's connect. I can share more about my one on one coaching, transformational keynotes, and ongoing leadership training. For wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, sending tons of love. Bye bye.